The Book of Exodus, from the ancient Greek, Exodus, is the second book of the Bible. It is the account of the Exodus and the origin of the Israelites, leaving slavery in biblical Egypt through the power of their God named Yahweh, who according to history chose them as his people. The Israelites then travel with the legendary prophet Moses to Mount Sinai, where Yahweh gives the 10 Commandments, and they enter into a covenant with God, who promises to make them a holy nation and a kingdom of priests on condition that they are faithful to him. God gives them his laws and instructions for building the Tabernacle, a small temple through which God will dwell and live with them and lead them to the promised land of their ancestors Canaan, the promised land. This land was promised earlier in the book of Genesis to the seed of Abraham, the legendary patriarch of the Israelites. The book of Exodus is traditionally attributed to Moses himself. Modern scholars see its original composition as a product of the Babylonian exile, 6th century before Christ, based on earlier written sources and oral traditions, with final revisions in the post-exilic Persian period, 5th century before Christ. American biblical scholar Carol Myers, in her commentary on Exodus, suggests that it is perhaps the most important book in the Bible, as it presents the defining features of Israel's identity, memories of a past marked by hardship and flight, a binding covenant with their God who chooses Israel, and the establishment of community life and guidelines for righteous living. The consensus of modern scholars is that the Pentateuch does not provide an accurate account of the origins of the Israelites, who instead appear to have formed as a whole in the central highlands of Canaan in the late 2nd millennium before Christ, around the time of the collapse of the Late Bronze Age, from the local Canaanite culture. There is no unanimous agreement among scholars about the structure of Exodus. One strong possibility is that it is a diptych, meaning that the book may have been divided into 2 parts when originally written, with the division between parts 1 and 2 occurring at the crossing of the Red Sea or at the beginning of the Theophany, appearance of God, in chapter 19. In this plan, the first part tells of God's deliverance of his people from Egypt and their journey under his care to Sinai, chapters 1 to 19, and the second tells of the covenant between them, chapters 20 and 40. The text of the book of Exodus begins after the events at the end of the book of Genesis, where the sons of Jacob and their families join their brother Joseph in Egypt, who Joseph saves from starvation. 400 years pass, and the new Pharaoh of Egypt, who does not remember Joseph, fears that the numerous Israelites might become a 5th column and enslaves them. He hardens their labor and orders all newborn boys to be killed. A Levite woman named Jochebed saves her baby by letting him float down the Nile in a Parath ark. The Pharaoh's daughter finds the child, baptizes him Moses, meaning taken out of the water, and raises him as her own. The story continues and can be read in the book of Exodus. Jewish and Christian tradition regarded Moses as the author of the book of Exodus and the entire Torah, but by the late 19th century, growing awareness of the inconsistencies, repetitions, and other features of the Pentateuch had led scholars to abandon this idea, making a grave mistake. In approximate round dates, the process that produced Exodus and the Pentateuch probably began around 600 before Christ, when existing oral and written traditions were brought together to form books recognizable as those we know, reaching their final form as unchangeable sacred texts around 400 before Christ. Although overt mythical elements are not as prominent in Exodus as in Genesis, ancient legends may have influenced the form or content of the book. For example, the story of the baby Moses' rescue in the Nile River is said to be based on an earlier legend of King Sargon of Akkad, while the story of the parting of the Red Sea may be interchangeable with Mesopotamian creation mythology. Similarly, the Code of the Covenant, the Law Code in Exodus 20 verse 22 and 23:33, has some similarities in both content and structure to the Code of Hammurabi. These potential influences serve to strengthen the conclusion that the Book of Exodus originated with the Jewish community in exile from Babylon in the 6th century before Christ. However, not all potential sources are Mesopotamian. The story of Moses' escape to Midian after killing the Egyptian overseer may be drawn from the Egyptian story of Sinai. But these are baseless dogmas and hypotheses. Biblical scholars describe the theologically motivated history of the Bible as salvation history, meaning the history of God's saving acts that give Israel its identity. The promise of posterity and ancestral land, the Exodus from Egypt, in which God saves Israel from slavery, the wanderings in the wilderness, the revelation at Sinai, and the hope of future life in the promised land. A theophany is a manifestation or appearance of God. In the case of the Bible, God's appearance to Israel is accompanied by storms, the earth trembles, the mountains shake, rain pours from the sky, thunder roars, and lightning flashes. The theophany in Exodus begins on the 3rd day of their arrival at Sinai in chapter 19. God and the people meet on the mountain. God appears in the storm and speaks to Moses, giving him the 10 Commandments while the people listen. Therefore, a theophany is a public experience of divine law. The second half of Exodus marks the point at which it describes the process by which God's theophany becomes a permanent presence for Israel through the Tabernacle. The fact that so much of the book, chapters 25 to 31 and 35 to 40, describes the plans for the Tabernacle shows the importance it played in the understanding of Second Temple Judaism at the time the priestly writers edited the text. The Tabernacle is a place where God is physically present, where through the priesthood Israel can be in direct, literal communion with the living God. The heart of Exodus is the Sinaitic Covenant. A covenant is a legal document binding two parties to undertake certain obligations to each other. There are several covenants in the Bible, and in each case, they show at least some of the elements of real-life contracts in the ancient Near East: a preamble, a historical prologue, stipulations, deposition and reading, a list of witnesses, blessings and curses, and ratification by animal sacrifice. Biblical covenants, unlike Eastern covenants in general, are between a God, Yahweh, and the people, Israel, rather than between a powerful ruler and a weaker vassal. God chooses through Israel to save humanity because the sons of Israel are the firstborn sons of the God of Israel, descended through Shem and Abraham to the chosen line of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. The goal of the divine plan in Exodus is a return to the state of humanity in Eden, so that God can dwell with the Israelites and all humanity, as he did with Adam and Eve through the Ark and the Tabernacle, which together form a model of the universe. In the later Abrahamic religions, Israel becomes the custodian of God's plan for humanity to bring the blessing of God's grace to every man, begun in Adam. This plan was fulfilled at the first coming of the second Adam, the Lord Jesus Christ, and the process was completed. There remains only one final act that we still await. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the Moses Film channel and give the video a thumbs up in support.